All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our series on Fortinet. This is episode 6 of our journey with the Fortinet technology stack. And joining us today is Steve Austin. He's a regional systems engineer with Fortinet. I also have with us today as a special guest, Rohan Kamat. He is a manager of systems engineering at Fortinet. William Grayson is joining us too, senior systems engineer, network engineer with XenTegra, and Dave Wynegar as well is joining us again. Dave, you've been on most of these so far. Appreciate your cadence and keeping up with us on this podcast series. So
Yeah, no
welcome
problem.
everybody.
Thanks for
So
inviting me back. It's always
yeah,
good to be on these casts with you and checking out your guitars in the background. And yeah, man.
oh, thank you. Well, guys, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to look at the FortiSASE stack today. And we've done some previous podcasts that from other vendors and some other areas from Fortinet that kind of play into this a little bit with the zero trust story. But today we're going to look at what kind of encompasses the FortiSASE journey, how folks are kind of looking at it, taking advantage of it, where it might fit into their organization, and how it might help you with your compliance needs and making things safer and better for your users. So with that, I wanted to give the microphone over to Stephen and Rohan to say hey, and how you guys doing today?
Doing good. Hey, thanks for having us. It's an honor.
Oh, thanks for being here. Very much so. So that's one of the hard things with the podcast series is one, me finding personal time to kind of put it together, but two, just kind of getting it all wrapped up. So I know it's the end of the week, end of the month. It's some companies, it's the end of their fiscal year. So it's been kind of a busy Friday and a very long week. But again, thanks for being here. And let's chat about this FortiSASE a little bit.
Sure.
Very cool. So as we understand it, Gartner kind of defined this a little while ago. The SASE, that's Secure Access Services Edge, kind of plays into like some kind of SD-WAN or next-gen firewall capability, maybe a firewall as a service, secure web gateways, and then like your CASB. And most vendors have multiple products that kind of align with each other. As we're looking at like 4 main areas that you want to tackle as you're kind of piecing this together, because it's not a turnkey solution. SASE is really like that framework that we're following, and then the technologies, they of course they differentiate a little bit from in between the vendors. But let's look at the components that kind of build that FortiSASE and talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, Chris.
Sure.
Hey, Chris. One of the things I like to think about when I'm thinking about FortiSASE, when you have the just like you have a voice over IP, the convergence of voice and data networks with a SASE protocol, no matter which vendor you have, or like you mentioned about Gartner's reference, it's really a blend of your networking services and your security services put together in a unified, structured way that gives you that end-to-end visibility of those two convergences of technologies and practices. So when you think of it, it's what we've been doing for a long time. It's just now taking the form of the SASE, that integration of security and networking. You could think of it as edge and cloud, but at the fundamental elements, it's bringing together the two main elements of transport and security to protect your data.
Yep, very much so. And Stephen, were you going to say something?
Yeah. I was going to say that, when I look at some of those definitions that are defining what SASE is, sometimes, this is just my personal opinion. I don't necessarily agree that it needs to be so prescriptive, right? I'm not baking a cake. If I add some sugar and some flour, I don't get a souffle. So some of the frameworks that are out there say that you need to have, X, Y, and Z to qualify as SASE. And I think our approach says, well, that may be good for some customers, but for other customers, there's a need to maybe, have a hybrid approach, right? And I think that's one of the strengths that we have with our FortiSASE offering.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Everybody kind of looks at it a little differently. It's not set in stone by any means, but what would you say some of the main components that encompass the FortiSASE solution comprises of?
So, of course, we have our SASE cloud. And so behind the scenes, that's firewall as a service, and that's powered by our FortiGate firewalls. And then we're also using our endpoint management system, EMS, to kind of orchestrate the client piece of that. So the EMS product is a complete, endpoint protection product that includes things like, antivirus, anti-malware, vulnerability scanning. And then, the heart of this whole entire system for us is really being able to assign zero trust tags to a machine based on predefined tagging rules that you'll build out in the SASE cloud. So why is that important to us? Well, a lot of us have focused for years about, on user identity management, right? Or being able to identify a user. And we're kind of taking that to the next step and saying, okay, I'm going to verify who the user is. I'm going to put all of those, current controls that we have in place, in the offering. But now I'm also going to be able to build out a way to actually identify the device that's connected to my network, right? And so there's this real-time telemetry conversation that takes place between that device and our SASE cloud. And it makes sure that that device is in continual compliance in order to gain access to the private apps and resources inside of your network. If I were to, show you a connection to like, an RDP host or something like that, and one of the conditions is that I have to have my, Windows firewall on. I'm a Windows client. If I turn that off, that connection goes away. So we're continuously checking that posture. It's not a one-time thing. There's not a one-time token that takes place. And then, we're enforcing that through our FortiOS proxies as part of our SASE solution to give you access to those resources that you need inside of your corporation.
Okay. And you brought up a interesting piece there. And since I'm not super familiar with this, I'm going to ask kind of as a newbie to it, is the presentation component of this, like you stated, like they qualified, I'm going to show them the RDP icon to launch that. Is there a presentation aspect to this as well for the users as they come in to
yes, absolutely. Yeah. And, in my experience talking to customers and even, fellow associates, when you can demonstrate that live and they can visually see it, there's like this aha moment that people get where they're like, whoa, that's really cool. It almost seems magical. One guy described it to me as, is that some kind of Harry Potter magic?
Well, it might seem that way, but it's not. A lot of hard work and a lot of code behind it for sure. So you pointed out, you touched on the fact that the FortiClient is a component of this. And for our listeners, we know that, well, maybe not everybody knows, but there's a ZTNA version of the FortiClient for the remote access. And then like you stated, there's the EMS for the endpoint management system version. And there's the antivirus and interaction with the EMS system, that endpoint management system is conducted with that a little bit higher level of FortiClient. Am I correct?
Yeah, you're correct, and that's a great question. And so in our traditional EMS FortiClient deployments, we have that option that a customer can say, okay, well, my interest really lies in zero trust network access. And so I want to focus on that. I already have an endpoint product maybe that I'm using. I already have antivirus or maybe Windows Defender's just fine for their organization. We leave that up to the customer. Again, we're highly customizable in our solution. But on the SASE side, we rely solely on the EPP, Advanced Persistent Threat Client. So that actually ships with the product. It's part of the offering. And so you still get that the antivirus and the anti-malware, and there's a reason for that. And so in the demos that I do for customers, I demonstrate how some of that stuff comes into play with assigning a security tag, right? Traditional posture checking, we might check and make sure that you have, an antivirus client installed, right? But we can go to that next step and say, okay, you have an antivirus client installed, and it has to have been updated in the last 7 days or 30 days or 14 days. And if you fall out of compliance, then maybe I'm going to microsegment my network in such a way that you can't get access to certain resources until you come into compliance.
All right, checking that posture. Yeah, that's definitely very important anymore. And you're referencing like the EMS, that piece, and from what I've seen myself, that is a cloud portal that we can log into and has a similar dashboard to the FortiGate that you might be kind of used to. Is there an option for on-prem EMS as well?
Not with the FortiSASE offering.
Okay.
So yeah, we're really trying to keep that orchestration and that administration into one layer, right, to reduce complexity. And
just to
go ahead.
elaborate on that, right? See, FortiSASE eventually is like a kind of a GUI or a portal that we are presenting it to the customer. At the back end is where the magic happens, where our firewalls and our EMS, which is an endpoint management server, work together to give that, different SASE GUI look for the customer. So when the customer is actually using the SASE, he's not going to touch the FortiGate or the EMS. The only thing that presented to that person is the SASE portal. So to answer your question, when we are doing the SASE, we don't require, the customer does not know anything about the EMS or the FortiGate.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So
that's for just administrative configuration of the policies, etc. I gotcha. Okay. Very cool. So we have that kind of, and that takes us to like the firewalls as a service though as well. So that component, how important is that? And I understand like the FortiOS kind of plays into it, since that OS is the core of a lot of this. Is that firewalls as a service? Are we directly interacting with that with our Forti clients inside of the office or inside of the home office, or maybe where have you? Are we interacting with that for all that communication back into the corporation?
Yeah. So what actually happens, and when I do the demo for you here in a little bit and kind of show this to you, we're trading telemetry, right? And that telemetry contains the information that the client needs so that it knows where all the FortiOS proxies are, so that it can provide that granular access to private applications and services.
Okay, very good. And I'll pop that up on my screen here. We're taking a look at it. So firewall as a service, the FortiCASB, a web application firewall, the sandboxing, and that's important. We want to isolate those users when there's a violation, the threat protection and SSL protection. So very cool.
Hey, Chris. One thing I'd like to ask about is you mentioned about the tagging and the metadata of the system. Can we hear more about the DLP features or some of the CASB, the Cloud Access Security Broker, in a way that it plays with compliance, or maybe using the tags and identifying where your data has been, or where it's been traveling, or anything like that? Or is it strictly just credit cards or numbers of strings that it's preventing? So anything more on that would be nice to understand a little bit better about.
Yeah, sure. Great question. So all of the features that you have available on the FortiGate for all of your security controls, so the existing DLP, the existing, file filtering and things like that, all still exist in the SASE cloud. So you're able to do, as you mentioned, like looking for credit card numbers, social security numbers, things like that. But then you have the, full capability to do any type of regex expression for DLP, right? Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Yeah, good.
Well, it's funny you bring that up, because customer demo earlier today, they saw the regex and they're like, is that already created, or am I going to have to write those? Like, no, we cover all of them in here, predefined in the can. So very cool. So when folks are taking this journey, what do you see? How do they usually present that they're interested in this? Are they looking to meet some kind of compliance, or they've heard it is a cool product? or what are you kind of seeing in the industry right now as far as why people begin this journey?
So a lot of the customers that I talk to have a very high interest level in just ZTNA technology in general. And then, of course, like, all of us, we read about SASE, and so they usually want to find out more. A lot of times when I'm, presenting the customers, if the conversation is going to be just about ZTNA, I might open up with FortiSASE and say, well, look, here's all this additional capability, and you can achieve the exact same outcome. So the customer interest level is kind of mixed. I would say it's, majority of people are just interested in the zero trust for private access. And then, you have those people that, contact us just because they want to know more about FortiSASE.
Gotcha. And you guys are really knocking it off the charts with your rankings this year. So I mean, really competing and leading the industry in a lot of regards here. Do you think it's mainly because of the technology, or do you think it's like a combination of the affordability and price point that organizations can get into these kind of things that makes Fortinet a leader in this space?
I think it's a combination of things, right? So, obviously for most organizations, budget is a consideration, right? Some of the other things that, that we offer is we have a very good proven zero trust deployment model for things. Other things that we're able to do is, unlike some vendors, we're able to do a lot of our security processing on box, right, with the FortiGate. So we have one of the highest SSL decryption ratings out there. Those are all validated by independent third parties. We are now one of the most, we ship the most firewall appliances out of all the other vendors combined. If you add all their numbers up, Fortinet is above them by, 20, 30, 40%, depending on who did that study. And those are all independent external studies, right? So I think there is definitely that value proposition that exists there. But now, our reputation, right? And we're really a customer-focused organization, like most organizations are. But we really listen to our customers, and when they have suggestions on how to improve our products, we take that very seriously. We have internal processes to, turn those dreams into realities for some of our customers. So I think has a lot to do with our success and why people choose Fortinet.
All right, cool. Do you see by chance like the entry point for customers into this kind of world? Do they ever lead with the FortiSASE solution, or are they typically already familiar with Fortinet, where like there's a FortiGate in place, or maybe maybe they're just using the FortiClient? Is there any particular area that seems a little more to rear its head a little bit more as an entry point versus some other areas?
Yeah, I think that, with a lot of the interactions that I had with customers, they're already Fortinet clients, or they're evaluating Fortinet as a solution, and then we talk about SASE, right? But we do get the customers in there that I talk to, on occasion that don't have FortiGate products, right? They don't have a FortiGate, they have no other Fortinet products, and they're just interested in SASE. So those type of customers, we can offer solutions for them too, to kind of start building them towards that transformation of, a true zero trust environment.
Gotcha.
And what we have also seen is a lot of the conversations these days, like Steven and myself are having, starts with an, the SSL and IPsec VPN tunnels, and then quickly takes a turn of a SASE when they hear what SASE can do. Because the way we do our SASE, as Steven mentioned before, we are not doing SSL, VPN, or IPsec tunnel, right? We are purely tags. So we are kind of creating, TLS tunnel between the client and our SASE cloud that helps to do, ZTNA as well as secure internet access. So we are not doing like a traditional SSL or IPsec tunnels. We are doing everything with respect to tags. And that is where when the customer sees that, they are like, wow, this is something very unique that not many customers are doing, not many vendors are doing right now.
The key differentiator then, huh?
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, and a lot of my demos, Chris, one of the things that's kind of interesting and is that magic moment for some customers is when they see me disconnect from SSL VPN, right? And yet I'm still able to access private applications and resources inside of data centers. And the way that we do that architecture, I would say that, our approach is one of the most efficient and one of the fastest that you can possibly get, right? We don't have to force everything to go up to the SASE cloud in order for me to be able to SSH into a device, right? I can make that direct connection from my endpoint directly to the proxy and make that connection. And my limitation at that point is the bandwidth that I have as a user and whatever I have at the entry point where I'm making that connection. So if I need to download a 10, gig file, right? That's my limitation, is that bandwidth. It's not some artificial cap with a lot of other providers that they put up in their SASE cloud of like 5 megabits. And if you want to buy another SKU, you can get 10. So I think that's one of the key advantages that we have and why we're choosing to do things differently.
It's very interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard it presented that way before. So that's definitely a unique characteristic of this solution. Are you seeing a lot of these conversations happen in the SMB space or more so in the enterprise space? Is there any area that's a little bit stronger, one versus the other?
They're happening in both. We have a little bit more customer contact in the SMB space because we, cater to a lot more accounts. And so the cycle with a lot of our customers is a little leaner than it is in enterprise. Customers make faster decisions in the mid-market sector. In enterprise and large commercial, there can be processes, legal, things like that it has to go through. So the amount of calls that I take on, a weekly basis for SASE is probably a lot more than like an enterprise systems engineer might take.
Gotcha.
And they're really a use case for that too, by the way. I mean, they're one of the key, sectors of the market that can really benefit from this like synchronous security inside and outside of their network.
Well, yeah, we're definitely at XenTegra. We talked to 2 user shops to 20,000 user shops, and they're all needing the same thing. And I would think that conversation moves a little bit quicker in the SMB space because they need that same security and to meet that same compliance that is presented to even the big guys. It scales a little differently, sure, but at the end of the day, there's a need for it. There's a place for these technologies, and they have to secure it at the end of the day, just like the enterprise sector would. So,
right. Yeah. And one thing you mentioned earlier, when you were talking about, the cost of ownership and things like that, we're all also one of the most competitively priced solutions in this market. So just like with our firewalls and everything else that we have, our FortiSASE cloud is reasonable even for small organizations. I mean, I've sold deals that, are as little as 25 users.
oh wow, okay. And is this licensed in a pack as far as like 25 users per pack, similar to some of the other products? Okay.
Yeah, it is. And our pricing is pretty linear. So, it doesn't really scale up really well, compared, or doesn't scale any different, I should say. Be more precise here when you're going, 25 users or 500 users or 1 year versus 3 years. But we have introduced a new product line called FortiTrust. And FortiTrust is something that brings, identity access management and a lot of other pieces to the table. And so we've taken our traditional EMS that you were familiar with, that you mentioned at the beginning of the call, with like the ZTNA only and the EPP ATP, and we've turned those into FortiTrust SKUs, and we're starting to turn FortiSASE into FortiTrust SKUs. So in the traditional model, I would buy a license pack of 25, and then if I wanted to add more users, I would buy another 25 license pack. Well, what if I only needed 5? With the FortiTrust model, that allows me to add individual license SKUs, per user, per year, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, wow. Okay. I wasn't aware of that. See, I'm learning all sorts of stuff today. Very cool. And from what I understand and from what I've seen previously, is it a best case scenario for a deployment like this, or are we going to have more options and be able to create a more robust solution at the end if the FortiGate if we do have a FortiGate on premise?
Yeah, that's another great question too. So one of the things with our solution is, of course, we can do secure internet access, as Rohan mentioned earlier, right? So that's your outbound access to the web, and you can put all the security controls in place. We have a couple different ways that we achieve that. So we have, secure web gateway, which you could think more of like a traditional proxy in the cloud. And actually the way you deliver that to someone without even using FortiClient is you just do a proxy pack configuration on their machine, right? And then that takes all of their outbound web traffic, puts it through the SASE cloud, all of the security controls are in place. And then, of course, depending on how you choose with SASE to do that reporting, whether you're using our FortiAnalyzer product or you're comfortable just going in the dashboard and looking at the logs, you have all of that customer interaction data, right? And that's also another great use case for, people that are doing BYOD, right? You can have an email simple script that just turns it off or turns it on, or like there's a lot of different ways to twist those nerds up. So the sky's the limit there.
Oh, wow. Well, like you stated there, the FortiAnalyzer, does that even take you to the next level as far as the insight and the configuration options that FortiSASE in particular would be presented with if that was in place as well?
Yeah, it's really an analytics platform. It has, very robust reporting for our whole entire product line, actually. So, it does great reporting and things like that for like SD-WAN and, next generation firewall and stuff like that. So what in our deployment model for SASE, there's a couple different things that you can do. You can send your logs off to something traditional like a SIM, like if you're a FortiSIM customer, you can, send your logs off over there, and that's where you can do your analysis. You have the option to send them off to, over to FortiAnalyzer as well. So then you have that robust reporting. Now, there is a feature in FortiAnalyzer that I love personally, and it's called the event handlers. What's great about the event handlers is I can write simple, text log message searches and queries and things like that in easy to understand language. I do not have to be a developer or programmer to accomplish this. And those can trigger off actions. So you're very familiar with our FortiGate firewall. And in the FortiGate, you have these things called automation stitches, right? So if I have a host that I detect that's compromised, there's several ways that I can get that telemetry back. When I build an event handler, that event handler can actually send a message or telemetry through the security fabric, right? That message or that piece of telemetry can kick off an automation stitch directly in my FortiGate. So maybe I want to isolate that user or, just quarantine them for a little while, right? Or some other action. And then I have the ability to decide, as the administrator, how do I want to be notified about that, right? Is it going to be through email, SNMP 1 and 2, SNMP version 3, or all of the above? You can stack them and you can nest them, right? So it's a really powerful tool when you integrate FortiAnalyzer with any Fortinet product.
Gotcha. So that automation and those actions that are taken, kind of regardless in the fabric, it's going to need some kind of data repository for those logs in order to transpose that into, okay.
If you look at the technical definition of the security fabric, and it says, what do you need in order to make the security fabric, right? The requirements in the documentation are 2 FortiGates and a FortiAnalyzer. Really, in reality, you just need 1 FortiGate and a FortiAnalyzer, or a FortiThing and FortiAnalyzer that works with FortiAnalyzer. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, that gate, because it could be a proxy and you can still use that as a root, things like that. So, there's a lot of things that you can do there, as far as building out a use case specific to your needs.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And well, I'm familiar a lot with we run the FortiAnalyzer VMs in our MSP in the data centers. And then I've even seen like almost looks like external USB drive kind of setups for FortiAnalyzer for the like Soho kind of setups. But then we also have customers that are subscribing to some of the bundles and might get the cloud analytics and those pieces. Does that qualify as a a qualifiable FortiAnalyzer to integrate into these kind of solutions with FortiSASE, or does it have to be?
I've never tried it. I can certainly see how I might implement that, as an engineer or an end user. But one of the things about our FortiAnalyzer in the cloud is, a lot of people think that there's a parity there with what you're doing with FortiAnalyzer, either hosted in public cloud, your own VM, or on-prem, right? And the main component there that is the differentiator is our SOC as a service feature that's built into FortiAnalyzer Cloud. And that truly, to me, seems to be the use case for that, right? It's a tier, 1.5 AI, security tech that can actually look at all the logs that are coming in, send alerts. There's escalation procedures and things like that. So just like you guys have when you onboard a customer to your practice for MSP, you might have a network matrix or a network questionnaire that they have to fill out. Where are my Nessus scanners? Where are my servers? Things like that. So onboarding for SOC as a service is kind of the same process, right? I also have customers that ask me, well, why wouldn't I just use this? Why do I need to, pay XenTegra to be my MSP? Well, again, it's just a second set of eyes. In some cases, it can replace if you don't have the staff and you're not, you don't have an interest in hiring an MSP to do that. It can provide some really powerful insights, right? But it can also catch some of those things that maybe you never thought of when you were doing that initial setup and onboarding with a customer as a managed security provider that, they might miss, right? So it's just kind of a stopgap, kind of keeping a second set of eyes on things. So that's really the big difference between FortiAnalyzer Cloud and our local, FortiAnalyzer. We have introduced a new SKU in this new quarter where you can remove that SOC as a service piece and just use the analyzer component.
Gotcha. Nice. Any other components of this solution that we want to touch on that we might have chatted about so far? Or is that kind of the gist of it in a nutshell? Yeah, because I definitely don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, but I'd love to leave that open for the opportunity for our listeners and customers to request a demo. But is there anything else that might be worthwhile noting out here?
Yeah, so one of the other products that we have with FortiSASE, it's very simple licensing SKUs. There's only a few SKUs you have to worry about when you're licensing the product, but we've recently added Thin Edge to the product. So what does that mean to the end user? Well, now I can buy a very inexpensive FEX 200F. It is specific to that model. A lot of us that have worked with Fortinet for a while know the FortiExtender as a cellular backup, right? Or a cellular capable router, right? So the FEX 200 doesn't have those cellular capabilities. It's a LAN extender. And so there's other uses outside of FortiSASE for that, for LAN extension, right? But that allows you to provide outbound access to like a small branch location by that, connecting to the FortiSASE cloud directly. And then it's able to send those users that are sitting behind that FEX up to the SASE cloud for the, their full inspection experience. It also does not require a client, so it's agentless. You can run clients if you do, but there's no reason why you would want to do so at that point if you do not need, private access to internal applications. So think of small kiosks or small branch offices and things like that. This allows you to provide that, synchronous security to those people in those locations, as well as the people in maybe your corporate office and things like that. So it's a really exciting product.
Oh, wow. Yeah, definitely look forward to learning more about that. That sounds very interesting. A lot of use case scenarios that are presenting themselves to take advantage of that. Okay, very nice. Well, Rohan, you got anything else?
No, actually, Steven covered the entire. Yeah, he did amazing. He covered everything. So no. Finally, what I would only suggest to you is whenever you're talking with customer, definitely bring SASE up. It definitely opens opportunities. We are closing a lot of SASE deals right now. It's just a matter of time, like to make customer understand the difference between SASE, ZTN, and SSL VPN. And once we do that, SASE is an easy sell for you guys.
Yeah, I've kind of presented it myself over the past year or so. It's kind of like you might live in a neighborhood and you have a maybe a fence around your yard, but this takes that fence line out to the gate of the community. So now it's like you're in a gated community. You're moving. You might not even see that traffic or that user or that security issue. It stays out there outside of the neighborhood and never even gets to the edge of your property there. So it's these technologies, we almost can't live without them anymore since everything's so vulnerable out there and impacted by the malicious traffic that happens, around the clock. These pieces of technology are almost a requirement anymore to be successful. So with that, thank you, gentlemen. I love these discussions and how we might be able to better serve our customers and make them more prepared for the future going forward. The world that we live in now, that again, it just demands that we take action, and this is one of the ways that we can ensure that we're meeting compliance and while keeping everybody safe and kind of sharing in the responsibility. And with a partner like XenTegra and Fortinet, we're here to make it happen for you. So Stephen, Rohan, Will, and Dave, super appreciate you guys joining again. I'll be reaching out in the near future. We'll look for another topic to cover. And as always, I got a ton out of this. So thanks for being here late on a Friday. And we'll catch you guys soon.
Hey, thank you.
Thank
A
you.
pleasure.
Take care.
Take care.